really started getting into the Dharma in New Zealand and was part of the Dage Buddhist Center there. And the spiritual director wasn't a teacher, but Laga Rinpoche was a student of Geshe Narwan Dage who came over to New Zealand when Geshe Narwan Dage was dying to help him and then kind of take over the center and help. He didn't receive the traditional Geshe education, as the Dalai Lama asked him to teach at one of the schools for Tibetan children, and he did that for 30 years in Kalimpong. He was incredibly humble and very inspiring. And one time we were walking down the main street in Dunedin, where I lived, kind of a little university town. And coming the other way was a Theravada monk in bright orange robes. And Rinpoche lifted his hands and said, Gendon la kyapsu chio. I didn't know what that meant at that time. And he said, I take refuge in the Sangha. And it made a huge impression on me because he didn't know this monk, I don't think. And yet it was the way that he said it and the sincerity and just, he wasn't saying it to me. It was just an expression of his refuge. And this little vignette in my mind arose during some of the teachings we've been receiving from Volume 4 from Venerable on refuge. And along the specific guidelines for refuge, particularly for the Sangha, His Holiness and Venerable Children write, respect monks and nuns as they are people making earnest effort to actualize the teachings. Respecting them helps your mind because appreciating their qualities makes you open to learn from their example. By respecting even the robes of ordained beings, you will be happy and inspired when seeing them. And I don't think Rinpoche knew this monk, but in another way he did. He's just by seeing someone in robes, he knew that this is a person intent on virtue, who has dedicated their lives to the practice of the Buddha's teachings. Like, and we don't know the inner world of that monk, but one can assume that this is what this person is doing. And it's also what this one monk in robes represents. The ordinary monk or nun is a symbol of the Arya Sangha, people who have realized true cessations and true paths in their mind, who have, on their way to being liberated beings and can help us most skillfully actualize the same thing. And then this, an ordinary monk or nun also is a symbol for the conventional Sangha, for more ordained monastics who can do most of the rites and rituals and perpetuate the Buddha's teachings in the world, and may qualify a place as a central land. That's a quality of our precious human life. So I've just been reflecting on how important it is that, particularly for monks and nuns, to respect other monks and nuns. And I know that many of the monastics that come to the Abbey, they remark on how we call each other venerable. And that in other places where they live or in other communities, they don't necessarily offer that term of respect to each other. It's just another, like, Joe or Jenny, or they just call each other in that way. Whereas preceding the reference with Venerable Kunga or Venerable Sepul, it both signals to the speaker that this is a person worthy of respect, and it also signals to the person being called that as this is a reference, a term to live up to, in terms of, am I acting venerable right now? Or am I in a poopy mood that is not so becoming of someone who is at their deepest really wanting to embody the Buddha's teachings and transform and free themselves from the afflictions. And so this isn't whitewashing the afflictions that do exist in our minds. I'm speaking for myself. I have the 84,000 afflictions. And yet I'm still trying as best as I can in each moment, however I wake up on any particular day, to try and practice. And it's a very helpful training in my experience to, my mind is very habituated to picking faults and to seeing the lack and where myself and others fall short. And that's not so helpful. Whereas to train my mind to hold others in esteem and to see their good qualities, it brightens my own mind. And I think when I hold that image of someone, it reflects to them how I see them and encourages them to further build on this good quality that I'm seeing, this inspiring visualization that I hold. And in some discussions I've had with other monastics over the years, particularly Venerable Tarpa, she's mentioned that, we have more in common here with everyone who lives here, guests and monastics, than we have differences. And yet, because we live with each other day and night and breathe the same air so much, the differences can start to become more obvious because we take the commonalities for granted. It's like, yeah, we're all here. And this one does this that I don't like, and that one does that I don't like, and this, well, why are they doing that? I don't understand it. And I know personally that the differences can start to be more loud and distracting and interesting in a perverse way than the commonalities that bind us together. I mean, how amazing it is that we all, every morning, most of us, unless something really comes up, make it to the hall every morning at 5:30 to do practice. Many of us up long beforehand doing other virtuous things, study, reflection, meditation. And the consistency of this and how we commit ourselves to this place, it's like, wow, how inspiring if we really look at each other and consider, like, we could be doing so many other things, and yet we are in each day, in each moment, choosing to be here and live this life of virtue. But I know that in my own experience, I can be distracted from that by my afflictions, observing others and making stories. When I was in Long Beach last year, Venerable Jigme with Venerable Jigme at Dzong Rinpoche's teachings in California, we had the opportunity to have a short interview, and I was soon to be going to Taiwan for full ordination, and so monasteries and communities and ordination was really on my mind, and I didn't have much time to ask a question, but I wanted his perspective on what a monastery is for him. Because I know that growing up in the Tibetan tradition is very different from how we live here. And he acknowledged that. His first response was like, well, it's quite different from me growing up as a child in a monastery. Like the monastery and the kamsen, the little houses that they live in, become like family, which isn't kind of like the model that we have here where children are raised by older monastics and that. But on another level, it's a place for like-minded people. That was kind of like the pith response. They said, a monastery is a place for like-minded people. And again, it brought me back to what Venerable Topper had shared, and just this thing of like, yes, how beneficial it would be to steep my mind in this perspective that I am constantly surrounded by like-minded people, not in a worldly way, but like-minded people intent on virtue, doing amazing things to do no harm, be of benefit, and to cultivate bodhicitta. And so just thinking of the benefits both in this life and the next of cultivating this respect and this reverence and this inspiration towards other monks and nuns, and the story that Venerable Chodron told in the teachings about how her friend, going back to New York City, and there was no other practitioners around back then, I don't know when it was exactly, but he spotted a monk over on the other side of the train station, and then forgot where he was going and climbed over down to the other platform to see another practitioner, to see a monastic. I think this was a lay person, because of the reverence and the inspiration, and I think what the robes represent, the connection to the Dharma. And then Venerable Nawang's story this morning, so beautiful, about how going into a vacuum store in Spokane and walking through the door and someone greets you with palms joined and isn't Buddhist, but because of the robes that you were wearing, saw that you were as a safe person and someone that they could open their heart to and discuss the tension between the metaphysical and the mundane. I mean, how beautiful that is. Again, this person doesn't know you, but because of the robes, it conveys your commitment to ethical conduct, wisdom, compassion, and this person had in them that respect to take advantage of that. And so that's what I want in my next life, to have that respect and reverence for the robes, for the Sangha, all the types, the ultimate, the conventional, the symbolic, so that when I see someone in robes, I am beelining for them to make that connection to those intent on virtue, to the teachings that they may be able to offer me or make me connected to, and the teacher, the fundamental teacher, the Buddha. So this is what's been inspiring and on my mind, and I thought it might be beneficial.